you talking to me? Come up here and say that.
There's a fellow up there looking for the Savior. Savior's backstage, we have a picture.
After leaving my home in Los Angeles about 8 hours ago and flying across the country, I found myself on the road to Woodstock, New York. I was finally going to meet the elusive and reclusive Barry Feinstein. Barry was the greatest rock and roll photographer in the 60s and 70s. He was the official tour photographer for Bob Dylan's first electric tour with the band in 1966. He was also the tour photographer for Bob Dylan's comeback tour with the band in 1974 after Dylan had not toured for 8 years. Woodstock, New York was famous for the big rock and roll concert in 1969, but it was also the place where Bob Dylan lived in the mid-60s and where he settled in seclusion for several years after his 1966 motorcycle accident. I didn't really expect to find myself visiting Woodstock, New York, but I'd been intrigued with Barry Feinstein's photos for a long time. And when I spoke to him on the phone, he told me he had over 3,000 photos. I just knew there had to be a lot of treasures in there that no one had ever seen. As I pulled into Woodstock, it seemed to me that this place had a lot of charm. Though I was only 2 hours from New York City, this place seemed like a hideaway where anyone could escape for a long time. I wondered if I could find any old hippies still hanging around Woodstock who might have some interesting tales to tell me. But how did I get here in the first place, you might ask? Well, I'd always been into Bob Dylan's music. I wrote a book about his guitar styles, and about 7 years ago I started Highway 61 Revisited, the world's only Bob Dylan tribute band. It's a look-alike, sound-alike recreation of Bob Dylan's greatest music and greatest shows. So I end up getting invited to a lot of Hollywood events. And in case you were wondering, that's me, not Bob. The center of town was cute, it was charming, the Dutch Reformed Church. And there seemed to be some homeless people that didn't look homeless, they looked like this was their home. I swear I'd seen those guys somewhere before, maybe it was the Woodstock movie. Then I saw an interesting looking guy in a pickup truck. Just ask you what your name is.
Bananas.
What's your name?
Bananas.
How long you lived here?
12 years.
You seen the old hippies around here?
It's the old hippie graveyard, like the elephant graveyard of hippies.
All right. All right, we'll see you later.
Yeah, you take care.
All right, take it easy. Did he say his name was Bananas? Hey, didn't I see that lady before? I turned onto a little side street, and a store caught my attention. Not Fade Away. There was Bob on a t-shirt in the front window of the Not Fade Away store. I was suddenly struck with the feeling of the passage of time, and it made me a little sad. Those hippies in town looked like they'd been fading away for quite some time. In what direction would this journey into the past take me? I thought for a moment. Woodstock seemed mysterious to me. It seemed like it might hold some secrets. It was going to be interesting, but now it was time to go to Barry Feinstein's house. Barry had been there with Bob Dylan from the very, very beginning, so I knew he'd have a lot of great stories to tell, as well as some amazing photographs. I couldn't wait to finally meet Barry Feinstein.
Joel, is that you?
Yes, sir. Hi, Barry.
How you doing?
Great to be here.
You have a good trip?
You bet. All the way across country from LA
All right.
to find the #1 director, photographer in the country.
You look like Bob Dylan,
You think
man.
so?
Yeah.
All right.
As a matter of fact, I do.
Yeah? A young Bob Dylan, I hope.
Well, of course. You know
Who's
my
this?
wife, Judy?
What a pleasure. Hi, Judy.
Nice to
to
meet
meet you.
you.
What a pleasure.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Woodstock. Ever been here before?
Never been here before, first time.
Okay.
But I don't think I want to leave. It's so friendly and beautiful here.
Great. We'll show you around.
All right. What a lovely place. I can't wait to make this film.
All right.
See all your stuff.
Well, let's get at it. Where do you want to go?
Up to the studio.
I carry 3 cameras.
They're all the same, Nikon F?
That's all I use is Nikon F.
Can I take one out?
Take them all out.
There you go, Nikon F.
Nikon F. Nikon F.
Any
Yeah.
special telephoto lenses you use for the show?
You know what I do? There's a 180 millimeter telephoto lens in there. Here, there's a 180 millimeter Carl Zeiss Sienna lens that fits onto the Nikons, and I use that a lot for the performance pictures. Get the sign, that sign's important. Take the can of soup away, you can read the sign. Tell you more about me than all you could think of asking me.
Did Bob give that to you?
Yeah,
Do you mind if I play it?
no.
That was fun. Thanks for letting me play it.
Pleasure, man.
All right. I like your Western cowboy hat. Where'd you get this one?
Bob Dylan gave me the hat.
Really? When?
1974.
All right. Are these your proof sheets?
These are the proof sheets filed away. It's just the negatives. And they're all stored away very gently and very good. That's why they've been preserved such a long time. This is 1966, naturally. And these are the pictures of Dylan with the children in Liverpool. And you could see that he's really happy to do pictures with the kids. And they liked him, and they didn't know who he was, really. This, for instance, they were all just looking at the camera and making faces.
These are all pictures from...
These are all Dylan pictures. Here's the picture of him in the limousine with the girls looking in through the window trying to get his attention. It's Bob in a limousine in England. And he's talking to me, smoking a cigarette again. Again, he's oblivious to who's outside.
There's something about your photography which, to me and most Dylan fans, feel is every photo a portrait. Every photo a portrait. That it stands far and above any photography done of Dylan at the time or perhaps ever.
I believe that. I'm happy to hear it because I feel the same way.
Can you give up any secrets? Is there any insight to what makes this portraiture?
First of all, you have to really like the subject. It's just the approach. It's really, it's hard to describe how to do that. You got to have a good eye. You have to have a concept on at the moment. The moment something happens, you have to be ready to shoot it. And that's what happens. That's what comes out.
When did you become a photographer? Let's go back to the beginning.
I worked as an assistant to a cameraman in Philadelphia. And I bought a camera and took a few pictures, and I liked them, and I thought I had a career in that.
You started out as a sports photographer. How and when did you make the jump to famous personalities?
Well, I mean, that didn't come till, you know, the years I went to California, which was in '57. You know, I worked at Columbia Pictures, but I didn't work as a photographer there. I worked as a, you consider a production intern nowadays. And I kept making pictures, and I started getting assignments. And one of the early assignments was Steve McQueen for Look magazine. And I photographed him, and we became good friends after that. And the rest of the people that we photographed start coming in place, you know, assignments, the political things. I was assigned to cover Nixon when he ran against Kennedy.
Which other presidents have you photographed?
Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, and Kennedy. I just enjoyed photographing them. You're looking for that one moment that you don't usually see on television. Some of the early album covers were Richie Havens, Odetta, Johnny Hammond, and then it just kept rolling, you know, more covers, and then I met Mary Travers of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Albert Grossman, who I knew prior to her, was a friend of mine, and he managed them. So he asked me to do some publicity photographs, and I did them. That's how I met up with Mary.
And how long did you know her before you got married to her?
A year or so.
Year or so?
Yeah.
And how long were you married?
3.5 years.
For how long had you known Albert Grossman?
I knew it from, I don't know, about 1958. Other than working at Columbia Pictures, I had a night job in a club in LA called the Renaissance. He came in with Odetta, and Benny Shapiro introduced me to him, and we became friends.
Can you describe the relationship between Bob and Albert?
Yeah, I mean, Albert looked at him as a son, you know, and Bob really respected him. Albert thought he was brilliant, yeah, and he was. It was a good relationship. It's a good picture of the two of them. They didn't put each other's business on the street. Everything they spoke about was very confidential.
How do you think he contributed to developing Bob?
Albert was Bob's manager and confidant. Albert took care of all the business for Bob.
Were they similar in some ways, Bob and Albert?
No.
No.
I don't think so. They were both Jewish. He just let Bob do what he wanted to do and let him write music. Bob lived in his house for a long time, and he sat in the back bedroom or wherever he wrote, and wrote some great songs. Albert let him, you know, Albert knew he was involved with somebody great, and he let him do what he wanted to do. And what he wanted to do was write songs. This is Albert Grossman and Bob Dylan in the limousine, and they're both laughing. It's a rare picture to see them both so up. He asked me to drive him to Central City, Colorado, where he worked as a piano player for a stripper once. And he said he got fired. The interesting thing in Colorado, on the radio, was the first time he heard one of his records played. And we pulled off the road, and he was blown away by that.
How did spending time with Bob on this road trip help him become a subject of your photography?
So we became friends, and we trusted each other. And I think the photographs I've taken of Bob, you could see that. We stopped at a big blow-up tent, and it was a Pentecostal church in there. And we went in to listen to some of the music. As we left, one of us didn't close the door right away, so the air started rushing out of it. And then we spent the night racing a train across Nebraska. Train blowing the whistle, we blowing the horn. It was just driving and laughing.
Tell me how you went to your first Bob Dylan concert with Mary Travers.
She said, "Come, let's go to the village. His kids playing the Kettle of Fish." And we went down and we listened to him sing and play. And that was the first time I ever heard him, saw him.
Do you remember anything about that performance?
It was interesting. It was hard to make out the words, you know, but there seemed to be something magical there. You know, you had a feeling with him that you were in the company of somebody very important, even in those early days. He is quite a person, a very unusual, talented person.
What were some of Dylan's favorite songs for you at that time?
Almost every one of them. They were all just fantastic.
What kind of thoughts did you have about Dylan and his music as you saw it develop up to that point?
I was knocked out by it. I thought his music was incredible. I thought he was a genius. And he really didn't ever look back. He always went forward. If he did something and people didn't think it was that good, he never went back to fix it. He just went forward and tried to go to the next plateau. I loved his music. I mean, some of it make the hair on your neck stand out.
When was the first photo shoot you did of Bob or for Bob?
The times they were changing, the album, the cover.
Now, in that cover, there's a brilliant close-up of Bob, maybe looking a little like something between Woody Guthrie and James Dean.
Could be.
That's been...
It's a good interpretation.
And that picture has been on posters. How long did that photo shoot take?
10 minutes.
Where was it done?
It was done on somebody's patio on the Upper East Side.
Was Dylan hanging around with Joan Baez at that time?
I'm going to try and get you an interview with a woman that knows all that, because he lived on top of the espresso that her and her husband owned.
I think we met Bob in '63, vaguely.
Did he come into the espresso?
He came into the espresso, it must have been in the summer, because we had, Tom Paxton was performing at the time.
And was Joan Baez there that summer?
She was there most of that summer. Yeah, Joan, her sister Mimi Farina, Richard Farina, Jack Elliott.
What was the relationship at the time between Joan Baez and Bob?
I think they were kind of hitting it off and enjoying each other's company, but they're two powerful-minded people. It would be amazing that it could have even, gone on any further than it went. I mean, they're just incredible. They fight a lot.
Would he write songs in the cafe by hand?
He wrote songs, yeah. He wrote quite a few songs there. 2 or 3 albums, some of the songs were written there, and he'd come downstairs and ask permission if he could play one of the songs he just wrote.
Did you let him?
No. Can you imagine, hearing a song for the first time that he just wrote? And he'd be like a little child, just very, excited.
At that time, did you have any sense of his creativity?
Well, sure. I mean, his words were powerful, God on our side. I go over his songs, and they stay with me always. It's like every now and then a line will just go by, and they're very powerful and strong. And yeah, I knew he was a poet, and there was no doubt about that. I think he's the greatest poet-songwriter of the last century.
How did you come to go on the 1966 World Tour with the band and Bob Dylan?
Bob wanted me to go. And the other thing was Life magazine wanted me to cover it, especially the European part of the tour. They wanted to do a story on Bob.
Did Life also send a reporter?
Yeah, they did. The man by the name of Roger Vaughan.
And did they actually do a story after the tour on the tour?
Well, he wrote it. He went on the tour for a while. After the tour, they killed it after the motorcycle accident. They didn't want to run it. My deal was I get all the pictures back. Pictures, negatives, and everything.
Okay, so this tour started in Hawaii, in Australia.
It went Hawaii, Australia, and it came around and went Sweden and Denmark.
And when did you join the tour?
In England. It's a picture of some photographer, Barry Feinstein. It was taken by Bob Dylan.
Was it your choice to shoot the 1966 tour using black and white film?
Yes, it was my choice, absolutely. This is a photograph of Bob walking through the gates in London. I always refer to this picture as, and don't ever come back here. I like what photographs look like in black and white, much more than color. Color is deceiving. I'm not fond of color. The tour lent itself to black and white film. It's more of a journalistic look, because if you look at the pictures, they're journalistic pictures. They're reportage. They're not, set up color pictures. This is a photograph of Bob Dylan in his dressing room reading Disc, a newspaper that has a story on Mick Jagger. It looks like he's in the bathroom, but it's not.
In all your photographs, did you ever use a flash? And why or why not?
In all my photographs, no, I never used a flash. I don't use it because they're cumbersome. I don't like the flash of bright lights. And I think who you're shooting at the time, there's a moment where it stuns somebody. And I think that natural light pictures are more interesting. Even if they are dark or shadowy, it's more real. It's verite. Backstage with Mickey Jones and his Telecaster and Bob pointing at something, as he usually did.
Him and Bob were the only Americans on the tour.
They were Canadians, yeah. Yeah, he brought upness. Upness, joy, fun. Richard Manuel, I loved him. He was up and fun too. Robbie was, a little more serious. Garth Hudson was by all means serious. And Rick Danko, he was an upper too. It was a wonderful entourage of mad fucking people. It was great.
What was Bob Newirth's role on the tour?
Newirth, liaison and humor. This is a photograph of Bob Dylan and Bob Newirth, and I love it because they're both hysterically laughing.
How did Bob Dylan choose his wardrobe? During that tour, he had changed to this Carnaby Street houndstooth suit, diamond striped pants. What was that all about? What did you think about that?
I thought it was Bob. It was Carnaby Street at its best. That was some suit, wasn't it? That houndstooth suit. This is on Carnaby Street. Bob's trying on some new clothes, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, making sure he looks good.
What would inspire you to take any given photo of what he was doing? Were you snapping him all the time, or only if you saw a certain poignant moment?
Only when I saw it was something different that he was doing. This is Bob on Carnaby Street trying on a pair of boots. It's really hard to explain why. Why? Because. That's the answer. Because I wanted to make that picture.
Did his hair look the same in the morning as it did in the evening?
Yeah, I guess it did.
So was that the sleeped-in look was how he looked all the time?
Yeah, what you saw was what you get, or what you get is what you saw. Intense, serious, sometimes jovial, but his hair all looked the same.
As a photographer, would you keep a low profile?
It makes it easier. It makes it easier on you and easier on the subjects to try and keep a low profile. I was trying to do, as they say, reportage.
Did you enjoy shooting Bob Dylan on stage as much as you did in candid situations?
No, I'm not really fond of performance pictures. But we did a lot of them, but it's not my cup of tea. I think if you really want to see performance pictures with a musician, you ought to buy a ticket and go to the show. That's my feeling about it. My pictures show the performer in a different light, a different way, and that's what people want to see. At least that's what I think they should see. One of my favorite pictures, Bob on the steps in Liverpool with all these children that were running around. It's a wonderful picture. We walked the streets in, Liverpool and found all these children and played with them and hung out with them and found this old abandoned, factory and played there and carried on. And this is a picture of Bob with some Lilliputian children in Liverpool. He seemed to love to take pictures with kids, children. They didn't know who Bob was. They had no idea who he was. They knew that they wanted to take a picture with him. At an abandoned factory, just thought the composition was really good. I liked the composition, I liked him, I liked the building, I liked the whole picture. It had a nice feeling to it. I call this bowling for dollars. Again, Bob just throwing rocks around and having a good time. I like the composition, I like Bob, and it's a fun picture. Again, in Liverpool, on that field of stone and brick near an abandoned factory, and Bob just having a good time. This was in Liverpool too. It was at that factory. It was just Bob fooling around, leaning against the door. He was really good about pictures. At least for me, he was. He'd do all kinds of silly things and wonderful things, and he knew when it was getting boring, so he'd do something funny. He's just walking down an alleyway between buildings, and I think Pennebaker was getting ready to photograph him. This picture is in Ireland. It was two young girls that were poets, were able to get into Bob's room to recite some poetry to him, and he really enjoyed it. They were very nice. They were pretty good poets, too. Bob just sitting there, it seems like he's contemplating something. It's a very passive, beautiful picture of him, and I love it dearly. It's in the dressing room, reflection in the mirror, the dressing table of this young lady bringing Bob tea. I'm pretty sure it was Ireland. The picture of Bob Dylan's hands with a cigarette, I presume. They looked very interesting, his fingernails. These were the hands that wrote all those wonderful songs. And I thought they were deserving of a picture. They look good. I call this Knock, Knock, Knocking on Heaven's Door. A picture of him sitting on the floor in the hotel next to the door that says, "Do not disturb." It's one of the rare times I've seen Bob autograph a poster. I think he wrote "God Bless" on it, Bob Dylan. And it's a reflection of him in the mirror. Bob Dylan on the telephone, cigarette in his hand, and I have no idea what he was saying. This picture is a portrait of Bob Dylan, and it was used in one of his albums, Live 1966. Bob Dylan just lying in bed with the phone, cup of tea. This is on the train from Dublin to Belfast. Bob looking out the window. He loved looking out the window. It was the only country in the world I ever been to where you have to go through customs from one city to the other. Too bad. Great photograph. We're on the M1 highway and he turns around to look at a motorcycle rider behind him. And I just thought it was a great picture. It reminded me of Don't Look Back. It's a picture of Bob going into a betting office. He did not bet. He just went in to see what it was like. Came out, the LSD was very symbolic. LSD, it's a betting parlor. This is Bob Dylan at the Ouse Ferry in England, waiting to go across to Wales. This picture was voted by Q magazine one of the top 25 pictures of rock and roll ever. In the background you could see Howard Hawks. One of my favorite. He's just sitting in the back of the limo, blowing a tune through a rolled up newspaper and having a good time. This is a photograph of Bob walking down the street in London with a crowd behind him and next to him. This was in Bristol. It was a rainy day and he just had his thumb on the window and it was very much like him. Sheffield, England. Bob walked in, he had a limousine, dancing his way with a happy look on his face. Sure looks good. Queuing at the theater in London, waiting to get in with the Bobby and a line of people. The Irish audiences were very down home, and that's where they loved the acoustical guitar.
What was your reaction when you saw Dylan with that electric guitar? And
I loved it. It was just uplifting. It was wonderful. And he took a lot of, he took a beating on that, going electric. I can't remember if it was in Scotland where some girl ran up stage and punched him. You know about that?
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, it was very quick. They resented him playing the electric guitar.
How did Bob react when he was attacked by a
He just brushed it off, I'm sure he was disappointed. He's not hurt, but disappointed.
What do you think the mood of the crowds were during the acoustic set, and then how did it change during the electric set?
Well, they got a little crazy during the electric set. They didn't want to hear it. They thought he was a traitor. They did not want him to change playing acoustic guitar. And when he played electric, they felt that he was a traitor to them for not maintaining the acoustical music that he always did.
What was it about their connection to him that they felt so strongly that he couldn't change?
Bob Dylan, he was the god, man. He was their god of the times. He was very important to these people, man. He was really important, you know. We'll never know how important he was to them. It was a different group than the Beatles, you know. This was very, very sincere people that just loved his acoustical music, loved his music. And then when he went electric, they went berserk.
How did Bob feel about that? Was he?
No, I'm sure he was annoyed about it, I'm sure. Just backstage, I think in France, just all the instruments and all the crates and cartons. I just thought it was kind of a nice, lonely photograph of instruments and electronics that they use. Bob Dylan and Rick Danko singing on stage, 1966. Sound check at the Royal Albert Hall. I love this picture because he was just sitting there by himself. I think he's holding a cigarette lighter in one hand and his arms across, and it's dark and mysterious. You can see all the seats are vacant, there's nobody there. One of my favorite pictures of Bob. Okay, this is a picture of Bob with his guitar. It's on stage, smoking a cigarette, and it's all backlit. And there's a halo around his hair, and the ring of smoke coming out of his cigarette is very interesting. I just saw him coming off stage, and his hair was up, and he was backlit, and it looked like a very mysterious photograph. Playing the piano. It's a picture of Bob, the performance picture, and one spotlight on him, and it's very dramatic. It looks good. It's one of the nicer performance shots that I have that I like.
As the tour went on, in what direction did you see the music go?
It moved forward, it moved backwards and forward again. And he played good. Sometimes he didn't play good. But it was always interesting to watch and listen to.
It was that Bob wanted to do live performance, now electric. He kind of wanted to set the world on its ear, I think, because everything he had done up to that point had been all acoustic, and he was the acoustic folk icon of the age. But when he decided to go electric, things changed. We got booed everywhere we went. But if you turn the clock back an hour, when Bob walked out with his acoustic guitar, you could have heard a pin drop. It was silence, as if you were in a cave underground. There was no sound whatsoever. Bob performed the acoustic set to absolutely adoring fans that were almost holding Bob up and hanging on every word. They were his flock. And when he walked off the stage from the acoustic, they stood and applauded until he was well back into the dressing room. We walked on stage, minus Bob, kind of took our positions. Robbie was checking his tuning. I was checking, making sure my bass drum was set with a couple of good pops. And out walked Bob, and Robbie started strumming and getting the feel for the first song, and he counted it off. And it was only later I realized there was a little unrest about that from Jump Street. And at the end of the first song, there was a barrage of boos and shouts and catcalls, and they absolutely hated it.
It's a shot of the whole group, Bob leading them, getting off the airplane in France, and there's Pennebaker filming him for Eat the Document. This is a photograph in France of Bob in the limo. Outside the window is the paparazzi on a motorcycle trying to take a picture of him. Paris, France. We were staying at the Georges V Hotel. Down below in the street was a group of young ladies wanting to meet Bob Dylan. Bob looked out the window and saw them all, and we sent Victor Maymutis out to bring up one of the girls. I did a whole set of pictures with the girl, and it made her day. She's really a French girl. She's really dressed very stylish. Birthday party, Bob, at the Olympia Theater in France. In Paris. I can't remember what birthday it was, but he sure enjoyed it, and he blew out all the candles. Happy birthday, Bob.
Did you give him a gift?
No, I didn't give him a gift.
How was the show in Paris?
The one in Paris was wonderful. He put its big 30-foot American flag on stage. He wanted to have the American flag up when he did it. He was sending a message to the French. I am an American.
How did the French react to the flag and to the show?
The French were, as I say, the French were the French. I don't know what you could say about the French. Thank God for the French. They do have a certain sophistication that is very hard to understand.
What was your relationship with Don Pennebaker and the film crew?
Well, Howard Hawk was a dear friend of mine. And his wife, who was doing the sound, was a good friend of mine. And Pennebaker became a good friend of mine. It was a good crew. They were very nice. They're pleasant. They were, you know, had a good sense of humor. And they worked hard at it.
I decided I would drive down to Manhattan and see if I could meet Don Pennebaker. I just loved the movie Don't Look Back that he filmed in 1965. Bob Dylan's gut-wrenching performance of the lonesome death of Hattie Carroll, as seen in Don't Look Back, is what really had turned me on to Bob Dylan. Pennebaker shot the 1966 Bob Dylan World Tour, and the film became known as Eat the Document, but it was never released. Manhattan sure was a lot louder than Woodstock. It was exciting to be here, though.
And that's with these children. I think in Liverpool. This is a new. No one's seen this one. This is like, call this giant bomb. You know, the giant.
A photograph I took of Bob lying on the ground, looking up at him, and he looks like the giant of all giants. I love this picture.
It's Paris because of the flag.
Right. No, I remember it well.
On the 1966 tour, did you film for ABC television?
Sort of. It wasn't. Yeah, ABC was definitely behind it. I was really filming for Bob, though. The deal was that he'd direct and I would be the cameraman.
And what was supposed to become of that film when the tour was finished?
Well, it was supposed to be a TV show, and along the way it kind of got separated from reality. And I'm not sure it ever really had any TV sort of goal, but that wasn't really my responsibility. I'd agreed to just be the cameraman, and when Albert got desperate because of the motorcycle thing, he asked me if I would try to put something together for ABC, and Bobby Newirth and I did. We did another version, which in some ways I like better because the performances are more consistent. That cut it from different performances at different places and cut them together, which I think, it was a style of editing that at the time people were sort of intrigued by, but I never thought it showed Dylan to very good effect. And I really liked the thing that Newirth and I did.
Well, here we've just reviewed some selections of Barry's work from 1966 before we started speaking. What do you think the difference is in an approach between a film and still photography beyond the obvious, that one is moving and one isn't? But what do you think you've got to do that he doesn't do, and what he can do that you can't do?
Well, I think still photography is probably harder than shooting with a camera. A camera, the action, the thing that motivates you to look at the thing is happening in the frame, so you just have to hold the camera fairly still and the picture will make itself. In a still picture, you're cutting off reality and you're getting, it's like opening a door fast, and you have to do it at exactly the right moment and have it exact. It requires a more of an attitude, more of a kind of an aesthetic condition than movies. Movies are easier to shoot. I mean, kids can shoot movies. Let's say 10 minutes. Let's just give me 10 minutes here. That should finish.
10 minutes is fine.
10 minutes. Okay, bye.
How does the work with Dylan, how do you consider that over your career as
well, it was a really, I'd done some films before that in that style, but I'd never made a complete feature film the way I wanted to, and that was really the first one, and it was pretty successful. So people took me seriously, and from then on I kind of could do what I wanted. And so it was an important thing for me. And I still think it's an interesting film. I don't think anybody's ever made a film quite like that, especially about Bob, and I'm not sure that they will, because it's a coming together of a lot of things that just have to happen, and you can't depend on them.
Okay, well, appreciate all the work and inspiration on those films, and I know that you're a great example for everyone that enjoys and appreciates documentaries. And
well, thank you.
Well, thank you for all your work, and certainly everything I've done, I always keep in mind what you've done.
Well, I've liked what you've done too. I think it's been cool.
Good to see you, Don.
Okay.
All right.
Well, there's a thing up there we got from Australia. Who broke the glass? You see that thing in the orange back there?
This one?
Yeah. Somebody gave us that when we went to Australia.
Who threw the glass?
Yeah. I think it's a magazine. I'm not sure what it exactly was.
Well, didn't that happen in England though, right?
Yeah, it happened at the party. We were in Sweden, and early one morning, we'd been up all night. We stopped, and there was a big destroyer, an American destroyer, and the crew was just waking up, and so we were out hanging around watching them parade on deck, and pretty soon the captain came down, and I didn't know I thought he was going to arrest us all, and I was filming, but he, in the end, he came up to Dylan and he told him, he was a big fan and that he'd written a novel when he was college called One Too Many Mornings. So Dylan was kind of a little out of it, but he thought it was cool.
What happened to your photos after the tour?
I gave all the pictures to life. And they developed them. I went up, I looked at them, make sure it was all okay, and hoping to see the layout in the magazine. But evidently Bob had his so-called motorcycle accident. And they decided not to run it, so they returned all the proofs, negatives to me. I had a Bonneville 650 Bonneville Triumph motorcycle. He liked it. He wanted to get a motorcycle. So I took him to the dealer up in the Bronx, and he bought a motorcycle.
When did you hear about the accident?
Oh, I don't know. A couple days afterward, maybe. A week afterwards.
And did you call Albert or try to call Bob to find out how he was?
No, I asked Albert how he was. He said, all right.
Why did you call it a so-called motorcycle accident?
Because I'm not sure. I wasn't there. I didn't see the motorcycle accident.
Okay.
I don't know if I believe there was a motorcycle accident. You know, maybe he fell off the fucking bike. But it didn't seem like, I mean, I rode motorcycles all my life. To me, a motorcycle accident is something serious. I just never believed that he had a serious motorcycle accident. Because a while after that, I saw the bike, and the bike wasn't twinged up.
It's a subject of controversy. There's people that believe that he broke his neck, and some people that think, well, he did it to alleviate some of the pressure on his life at the time, to take a break.
Yeah, I don't think he broke his neck. I think he just went to get rejuvenated. I think it was the tours and the times, they were very difficult on him. I mean, he got to a point where there was a lot expected from him, and, you know, he may have done things that weren't good for him, and I think it was a time for him to get healthy again.
You don't think he'd have the power just to take a break or tell Albert, I don't want to tour for a while?
I don't think it was about that. If he told Albert he didn't want to tour for a while, take a break, Albert would say, sure, Bob. I think he had driven himself into the ground, and it was time for him to clean up.
I heard this, somebody say it was just a spill in the driveway. Somebody say it was, you know, just, it wasn't much. He told me he cracked 2 vertebrae, and he saw his whole life pass in front of him. And I think he's full of shit.
I didn't know if it was 2 or 3 days before I was to get on a plane to go back to New York for rehearsals. I got a phone call from Bob. I said, I'm getting ready to get on the plane to come back for rehearsal. He said, well, that's why I'm calling you. We're not going to do rehearsals. You don't need to come back to New York. And I'm thinking, what could be wrong? He said, well, up in Woodstock, I was riding my Triumph and I crashed. And I came down on my head and I broke my neck, and I'm in the hospital and I'm in traction. So I don't know how long before we ever play again.
Well, I guess Bob survived. Survived the motorcycle accident, whatever else might have been wrong, and the 1960s. A lot of other musicians didn't make it out of the 60s, or barely into the 70s, but I guess Bob was always a survivor and still is.
Around 1968 or 69, there was some breakup between Albert Grossman and Bob Dylan. Do you know anything about why they went their separate ways and how that went down?
I'm not sure. I think it was about, I think it was about Bob, about publishing. I don't think that Bob thought that anybody should have, a percentage of what he writes anymore, even though he was legally bound to Albert. And they just broke apart. But there was an interesting thing. So I hear that in the lawyer's office, Albert said he'd flip Bob for double or nothing, and Bob wouldn't do it.
Was Albert upset?
Yeah, he was upset, but he loved Bob, Bob was like a son, and he didn't want to see it go. He loved him. He thought, he thought he was the greatest that ever lived.
What was it like being married to a member of the biggest folk group at the time in the 60s?
It was great. It was fun, and it was wonderful. It broke off because she was out on the road a lot of the time, and I think we were growing apart from each other. But I think in 1967, I went off to San Francisco with Steve McQueen to do a movie called Bullet.
What was it like working with Janis Joplin?
It was wonderful. She was funny and good and a professional. I did the picture, and I was going to show them to her the following day, I think. She died. She never got to see the picture. So my life was in between doing album covers, magazine things, and being a still photographer in motion pictures.
You produced an innovative film that I was lucky enough to view called You Are What You Eat. You directed it, you were the cameraman.
My concept was that music had a certain beat, and that you could really do almost anything to the beat of music. And I thought you didn't need a lot of dialogue in this kind of documentary, because all the kids were in costume, in makeup, and ready to perform. I found it very exciting. I just went out with my camera and a sound guy and started shooting different things, different, happenings. You get a hold of one kid and tell him you want to do something, he'd show up with 20 other people. And it was really easy. I filmed the last Beatle concert at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. I got the Beatles to let me film it. I only wanted to film the crowds.
Tell me about this town of Woodstock. What was it like in the 60s when some of the band was living here and Dylan?
It was exciting. It was Woodstock in the 60s, in the 70s, up until the beginning of the 80s was just a wonderful place. Since then, most people moved out, and the New Yorkers moved in, and it doesn't have that excitement anymore. Go into the center of Woodstock and hang out for a few hours, and you'll see what's ever left of the 60s.
And what are those people still doing here?
Who knows? Ma'am, I don't know if they're homeless or they have homes, but they seem to just be able to live here.
What's your name?
Grandpa Woodstock.
You know who I am?
You told me.
You ever heard of Bob Dylan?
Yeah, you just told me. Yeah, Bob Dylan. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I've been listening to your music for years.
What's your favorite song?
I don't know any names of songs. I don't remember them.
You ever heard of Like a Rolling Stone?
Like a Rolling Stone? Yeah, that's got a lot.
Yeah, you know that one? I think they wrote that about you.
They did.
Yeah. How does it feel to be without a home?
Yeah.
Like a complete unknown?
Yeah, that's right.
Like a Rolling Stone.
All right.
Where do you live? Where do you come from?
I live on the street.
When did you come to Woodstock?
I come here in '99.
How do you make money here?
I spread peace.
Spread peace?
Yeah.
What do you do to eat?
I get enough money in donations.
Donations and what? Is it a good gig?
Doors down in my box.
Good to see you.
Yeah. I play the horn.
Oh, man, that's annoying.
I go with the drum.
That's annoying.
In the drum kit.
All right, here I was. Yeah. All right, what's your one word of wisdom for us? Because we do have to go.
peace and love.
Peace and love? That's
and
not
love.
original. That's like from the 60s. I want a new message.
Well, that's what I do. I spread peace and love.
I need a new
That's
message.
what the world needs now.
No one cares about that. I need a new message.
Yeah?
Do you have an updated message?
An updated message. All right.
Anybody have a guitar here? I can play you a song too. Play on the song. Can I do it right here? Is that all right? Yeah. I won't offend you or anything? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you.
Next thing, I asked Barry and Judy to show me around Woodstock, and it was beautiful. Rural roads, streams, peacocks, deer, and even more deer. There were beautiful farmhouses nestled away on the sides of the road. I just loved Woodstock. It was beautiful. I can see why Bob Dylan, the band, and Albert Grossman settled here. And there was a gorgeous lake. I just loved it. I forgot all about Los Angeles. I decided to go house hunting. Maybe one of the houses Bob Dylan lived in was for sale. There was only one way to find out. Wow. This is the house where Dylan lived on Ohio Mountain Road. All green, summertime, Woodstock. Couldn't be more beautiful here. No for sale sign. Oh well. The people who lived there said I could look around the estate, and that was good enough. This was an impressive estate, absolutely immaculate, beautiful log cabin style. I could definitely be comfortable living here. I'm sure Bob was. From Ohio Mountain Road, the next stop was the Birdcliff Estates to look for the mansion called Hailoha. The Birdcliff Estates was very secluded. It would have been impossible for anybody to find Dylan up here, I thought. This was another beautiful estate, like the house on Ohio Mountain Road. Quiet, beautiful. Why Dylan moved from here to McDougal Street in Greenwich Village, where the likes of AJ Weberman would be waiting for him, I do not know. No doubt Dylan asked himself that same question. There seemed to be a lot of people home, and I didn't want to disturb anyone, so I decided just to say goodbye to Hailoha before even saying hi. Neither of these houses were for sale, and they certainly would be beyond my budget.
In 1971, George Harrison asked Bob Dylan to perform at the concert for Bangladesh. Tell me what you did with that concert and what your involvement was.
I was the photographer that photographed it all in color, not in black and white, because George Harrison wanted the booklet to be all in color. I was really there to do the cover and the booklet.
What was it like seeing Bob perform on stage after
It was great.
five years?
Well, I spent some time with him before that afternoon, and he said to me, "Do you think I should play in this concert?" I said, "No, you should do it, man." He said, "Really, man, you think?" I said, "Sure, you're here." And it was good to see him. I had this Western shirt that he wanted. At least it seemed like he wanted, so I tried to give it to him. No, I don't want it. So I went back and forth, throwing it back and forth. So finally he took it. And not until 1974, when we were in Washington, that he went out and bought me a cowboy hat. But yeah, it was great to see him at that concert. It was a great concert.
Next, I decided to make the 2-hour trip back to Manhattan. I wanted to get to Greenwich Village to take a look at Washington Square Park and await a meeting with AJ Weberman. Later in the day, I tried to go see Al Aronowitz in Elizabeth, New Jersey. In the meantime, I made my way down to the village. Washington Square Park was in the heart of Greenwich Village, 1 block from McDougal and Bleecker Streets, and near the Gaslight and Speakeasy, where Dylan and so many other folkies in the early 60s performed. AJ Weberman is well known to Dylan fans because of the phone conversations with Bob Dylan that he recorded in 1970. Most Bob Dylan fans have copies of these conversations in their collection of bootleg tapes. Weberman went on to become infamous for harassing Bob Dylan by rummaging through his garbage, starting the Bob Dylan Liberation Front, and organizing a birthday party for Bob Dylan with about 1,000 people in front of Dylan's house on McDougal Street. He just wouldn't leave Bob alone. I was looking forward to confronting AJ Weberman about all of his shenanigans and theories about Dylan. Tell me about AJ Weberman.
AJ was a nut.
Weberman agreed to meet me in a dog park where he was walking his dog Puggles.
All right, we're here in, what park is this?
Carl Schultz Park.
We're here in Carl Schultz Park at
The dog run.
At a dog run. We're surrounded by little dogs. So thanks for joining us.
Okay, great to be here.
All right. How and when did you first coin the term Dylanology?
I guess it was when I took over this Dylan class at the alternate university in Manhattan, which was like a Maoist
What year was
kind of
that?
university. That was around 1968. And somewhere along the line, the word Dylanology popped up in my mind as a scientific study of Dylan's poetry. You know, I was the first to use a computer back in 1970. Went to NYU and typed it on the computer cards, and then we put that and made a magnetic tape, and then we came out with a printout, which is this thick, of every word in Dylan's poetry, along with a line of context in alphabetical and chronological order, which was known as the Dylan Word Concordance. But now I'm able to do this, you know, in a much simpler fashion with a home computer, and you know, I can see what Dylan means by a word, how Dylan uses the word. That's the key. How he knows the English language to this extent is beyond my comprehension. The dude is a walking, unabridged dictionary. You know, it's just mind-boggling. You know, a lot of people say, oh, Dylan is the Shakespeare of this time. Hey, Shakespeare was the Dylan of his time. You know, he's like a freak of nature. I don't understand. You know, it's like somebody that's born and the kid is 5 years old and all of a sudden he starts playing Mozart on the piano out of nowhere. You go to a thing like Tarantula where, you know, it's the zenith, the apotheosis of Dylan's genius, where he does this for 100, 200 pages of intensive symbolism. People are going to say, hey, this is all just words strung together. You know, it's just all kinds of crazy images. It's not. It's because they can't understand it. There's logic. The Dylan is trying to say something in every word in that book.
Is it true that you sold Tarantula before it came out?
Yeah, I did. I bootlegged it. I had my Dylan class collate it. And I go down to St. Mark's Place and 2nd Avenue and sell it.
Were you an obsessive fan?
Yeah, absolutely. Obsessive fan of Bob Dylan. You know, I started out at Michigan State University. You know, when Dylan was a little chubby, he had a rounder face. And then I found that Dylan shared the same politics I did. I was in the civil rights movement, where the times are changing. And then I was totally sold on Dylan. And then I got busted at Michigan State for selling reefer and had to come back to New York City. I would get up in the morning and smoke a joint, stay high all day long, then get drunk around 8 o'clock. You get into things like drinking, like when I drank all the time. I knew it was no good for me, you know, but I got addicted to it. I couldn't stop. I lost control.
Where you actually had a prison experience?
Yeah, I got busted for running a marijuana delivery service. So I did 9 months at MDC, which is the Metropolitan Detention Center.
What's the difference between a marijuana delivery service and being a drug dealer?
I don't, marijuana is less toxic.
You were using drugs or selling
I was
drugs?
smoking. I don't consider pot a drug. I consider it a herb.
How did you first make your personal contact with Dylan?
I went around, knocked on his door, and he came down and said, "Al, you're not going to get into my life." So I went back and got his garbage. I reached down into the trash, and there was a letter from Johnny to Johnny Cash. And I says, "This isn't trash. This is a stash of, incredible information." So that's how Garbology was born, I was the first private citizen to go through somebody's garbage. The CIA and the FBI did it before me. Garbology is an accepted field of journalistic practice now. Journalists do it all the time now.
What was a typical Garbology mission like for you? What time would you leave your house? How close did you live to Dylan, and how would you go about it?
I would wait until late at night, until they put the garbage out. I'd just walk over there. I lived within about 10 minutes from Dylan. I lived on Bleecker and Bowery. Dylan lived on Bleecker and McDougal. So it was just a quick walk down Bleecker Street. And I'd go over there and just remove the garbage and bring it back to my house and analyze it.
What were you looking to find?
I was looking for a Rosetta Stone. I was looking for a cipher pad. I was looking for something that would, help me in deciphering Dylan's poetry.
Did you ever find any drug paraphernalia?
No, I never found anything of that nature.
Is that something you were looking for?
Not really.
What did he do in response to what he, I'm sure, thought was an invasion of privacy?
He stopped putting out his garbage for a long time.
Did this eventually lead to a physical confrontation with Bob?
Yeah, well, what led to that was I got publicity crazy. And after we did the Bangladesh concert, I said, I wasn't going to go through his garbage anymore. But I went back with this reporter and from Associated Press and did it anyway, and Sarah came out, and Dylan told me if I ever messed with his garbage, he would beat the shit out of me. Dylan came around on his bicycle and drove around Bleecker and Elizabeth, and the next thing you know, he was on top of me, beating the crap out of me. But I was glad to see him, so I says, "Hey man," but that didn't really do any good. So he just started beating my head into the pavement. Some hippies came out, pulled him off, and I got up. He took my free Bob Dylan button off, when he threw it on the ground, and walked away. Like I'd been like a soldier who'd been court-martialed, and they took off all his decorations. And then these bums came over, and they asked me, they said, "Did he get much money, man?" I says, "What do you mean?" I says, the guy that just, was beating you up, did he get much money? I says, "No, man, that's Bob Dylan. He doesn't have to come down to the Bowery and roll hippies." He called me up and said, "Al, how would you like a job as my prompter or my chauffeur?" I told him, "You're not going to be able to buy me out, man, What I want from you is I want you to write political songs, and I want you to stop using what was, in my opinion, was heroin. Because you're going to hurt yourself, and you become apolitical because you're afraid of the heat that you don't want to become another Lenny Bruce."
Well, why the constant, it seems like there's some theme that you are convinced and continue, you talk to Dylan about drug use.
Yeah.
Why that theme of investigating and prompting him about him using drugs? Where does that come from?
I found a lot of it in his symbolism, in his poetry. "Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. Cast your dancing spell my way. I promise to go under it. I'll go along with the dance. Wait only for my boot heels to be wandering. To boot a drug is to shoot it up. You better stop messing around, get your act together, and settle down, or you're going to be another accident statistic. You're going to OD. A backwoods girl. I was backwards in the sense of my poetry, interpretations of Dylan's poetry, and I played Dylan's songs backwards. I was the first one to discover backwards masking when I played If Dogs Run Free backwards, and I found the words, "If Mars invades us." And this was in Rolling Stone. John Wenner, who I was friendly with at the time, put it in Rolling Stone magazine.
Did you hear drug messages in Dylan's records played backwards?
No.
Well, that's good to hear.
No, I didn't. But I heard other things. You know, and
Well, let me ask you this. If you made the point to Bob...
I had everybody playing them records backwards, and then somebody played one of the Beatles records backwards and got...
Paul is dead.
Paul is dead, miss him, miss him.
If you talk to Bob and explain to him, I'm a fan of yours, in your opinion, he's doing wrong things, using drugs. After he heard you, what's the point of pursuing it to the point of pissing him off and harassing him and making him upset? What was the point of continuing that? What would you hope to gain? What was the point?
I wanted to show Dylan that there was one person that he couldn't buy out. Dylan offered me, said, look, Al, you change certain aspects of Dylanology, I'll let you come to all of my recording sessions. You can go on tour with me. You see all the women that come around here. You know, you can get a piece of the action.
Bob told you all that?
Yeah. Dylan was seriously considering, in my opinion, from what I can ascertain from his songs, was putting out a contract out on my life. But he decided against it. He was thinking about it.
Did you read that in a song?
He would tell me, he says,
Did you read that in a
Al,
song?
yes.
Which
but
song?
he would tell me, Journey Through, Where Are You Tonight? Journey Through White Heat. The song when he says, laughter done on Elizabeth Street.
What if you were just wrong that everything in all these songs meant drugs? What about
not everything in all the songs?
What about Rimbaud, Verlaine? Is that drugs?
Rimbaud and Verlaine?
Rimbaud and Verlaine, is that drugs?
Hey, Verlaine, that was...
Dylan Thomas, drugs?
No, absolutely not. The Rimbaud and Verlaine is, you're going to miss me. I'm going to miss you when you're gone.
Why not drugs?
You know, hey, guess what?
Drugs.
Rimbaud, Verlaine was a critic, and he shot, he had a get out of here, kid.
People were using drugs, and Dylan writes a song about drugs. As a poet, he's writing a song, could be from someone else's perspective.
No,
I don't
he's
understand
writing it,
how you get
it's
the
about,
conclusion
hey, Mr.
that
Payton,
he's using drugs.
Because
Why
when the
does it have to
songs
be
are
that
first
way?
person.
The man is perceptive. He can perceive things. He
It's
can
from the
write
first
about
person.
things.
It's from the first person. He's writing
Why?
about it from his point of view.
How do you know?
Because it's one more weekend with you.
Maybe he's writing
about you.
about
When I talk to him, he tells me, no.
Quote, Weberman would do anything to disrupt Bob's privacy in the guise of a revolutionary expedient.
There was no guise of a revolutionary expedient. I was a revolutionary at the time. Absolutely, positively. You know, my FBI file, they were investigating me for insurrection, for sedition, for harboring fugitives from the Weather Underground. I was working with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and that whole crew and the Yippies.
Okay, explain, what did going through Dylan's garbage or harassing him have anything to do with any of those movements?
Dylan was a guy that made his initial, you know, he used folk music as a backdoor into rock and roll. And he started with a, you know, I'll be your baby tonight. Shut the light, shut the shade, you know, bring that bottle over here, write songs in a certain way that they're done in a formula, like a baby bottle. You know, bottle lyrics.
AJ, honestly, I get the sense that you weren't trying to explain Bob, you're trying to expose him.
I was trying to expose the fact that he had given up politics. There was a war going on, that America was committing genocide against the Vietnamese. Perhaps I felt he had more power to stop this thing than he really did, but you know, that's why I was down on Dylan's case.
AJ, by looking in the Dylan's garbage, were you really looking for a biographical sketch, or was just this way, some way of harassing Bob, or maybe getting his attention as an obsessive fan?
No, I was trying to find a key to his poetry. That was my motivation in doing it. I wasn't trying to harass the guy in that sense. By bringing my Dylan class around to his house, yes, I was trying to harass him. By having a birthday party with 1,000 people in front of his house, yes, I was trying to harass him. I was wrong for what I did.
What do you mean by that?
You know, I shouldn't have gone to his garbage when I swore it off. I was just publicity hungry, and, you know, I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry I did this stuff.
Were you the source of the story that Dylan was contributing half the money on the '74 tour to Israel?
Yeah.
Who did you tell that to?
Newsweek magazine and Time.
Okay, why did you tell Time and Newsweek that Dylan was...
To screw Dylan, you know, because I was vituperative, because I was a nasty person. Like the fool that I was working with the PLO at the time. So my revolutionary Maoist ideology, my self-hate, self-destruction, my corrupt ways, it finally made me blind.
What are you happy about from Dylan's career in music? What is it? Has it brought you fun and joy with the music? Has it brought you a profitable career? What is it?
No, it hasn't brought me a profitable career. I never made any money from Dylanology. The only thing I got was I got $3,000 for that Dylan Weberman telephone conversation. That was released recently in England. Maybe I got a couple of bucks here and there from some articles, but if I did, I don't remember it right now.
Are you still a big Dylan fan and enjoy his music?
Absolutely, positively. I listen to it all the time. And I understand a lot more now. You know, when I hear it, I don't just hear it on the superficial level. I hear it on 2 levels at once, which is, you know, quite interesting. In other words, when I hear Dylan sing, you see this one-eyed midget. I know I is mine. Midget is a minority group. You see this single one-eyed midget shouting the word now, freedom now. You ask for what reason. Mr. Jones, the journalist, asks, why do you want your freedom? He asked the wrong question. He screams back, how? He says, I'm not interested in you know, giving you reasons. I just want to know how I'm going to get it. You ask, what does this mean? And you ask another wrong question. He screams back, you're a cow. You have the material wealth. Give me some milk or else go home. Give me some of it or else let's not even talk. Something's happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? So I hear it on the level of, you know, that surreal level of a midget with one eye shouting the word now. And I hear it about the civil rights movement. So it's fascinating, and I want to turn other people on to it. I believe in a lot of what Dylan says. Let's see. If you wonder why I'm looking around so much, I'm looking for my dog, making sure it hasn't...
Right there, Puggles.
Okay, it's Puggles. It already got one dog pregnant here in the dog run with 4 pups. I was studying my Dylanology, and the next thing I knew, they were hooked up. I tried pouring water on them.
Well, at least your Dylanology has led to something.
Yeah.
Next, I decided to go to Elizabeth, New Jersey to visit with Al Aronowitz, the godfather of rock journalism. Al Aronowitz had written an important article in the Saturday Evening Post in 1968 about Bob Dylan's life in Woodstock. More importantly, he was very close to Bob Dylan in the mid-60s and also close to the Beatles. And he helped arrange the first meeting between the two. I couldn't wait to get the details.
The Saturday Evening Post decided me to do a piece about Bob, and I started hanging out with him. And I reached the point where I found hanging out with him was more important to me than writing about him. I immediately recognized Dylan as an immortal. I had immediately recognized Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg as immortals. And I recognized Bob Dylan as immortal. I mean, all those people had something great. That's something inspirational to me. They helped change my life, all of them.
And how close did you actually get to Dylan in terms of being his friend? You wrote that you were with him when he wrote certain songs.
Yeah, well, he stayed at my house for a while. When he visited, he came to New York, he would stay at my house.
And did you have a chance to watch him write songs? Or?
Yeah, well, he wrote Mr. Tambourine Man one night in my house.
Was he looking through poetry books at the time? Was he reading
He was
Dylan?
listening to Marvin Gaye's Can I Get a Witness over and over and over and over again throughout the night.
And in the morning?
In the morning, I went down to the garbage pails. I noticed that I'd gotten his, what he had thrown out, his false starts. And so instead of throwing them out, I put them on my file. And I was, dedicated to Dylan. I'm dedicated to him achieving greatness because I saw, I considered him an immortal. I wanted to help him get there. Sort of hoping that some of his immortality would rub off on me. So, he let me in on a lot of things, but he didn't really reveal himself entirely to me, ever.
Did he to anyone?
No, I don't think so.
And how did Dylan feel about the Beatles?
At first, he thought they were bubblegum. So Susie Rotolo, was telling him they're great, and I'm telling him they're great, and he's saying, about bubblegum. It was just, the Beatles were just sensational. They were so talented, their music was so great, and they just brought this great feeling to the world. They would Beatlemania. At first I thought when I was singing, I get high, I get high, I get high, I thought they were singing, I get high.
The Beatles song.
The Beatles song. Because how can anybody make such great music without being a pot smoker? At that time, every musician I knew was a pot smoker, and all this beautiful music was coming out of it. Well, when I got close to John in England, afterwards, I was assigned to do another piece for the Saturday Evening Post, and they sent me to England. And he said, no, I can't hide, I can't hide, I can't hide. But meanwhile, all of Britain's youth were all pillheads.
Pillheads?
Pillheads. They were all popping pills, any kind of pills, speed. There were all kinds of pills coming on the market then.
Did the Beatles do those?
Yeah, they did. They were pillheads. The first night when we went up there, when I brought Dylan up there, they said, "You want any pills?" And we said, "Well, we don't do pills because like the hippie culture at that time said that pills are chemicals. They're not good for you. But grass grows out of the ground. That's nature."
Right. Who won the discussion between the Beatles offering pills and...
We did. The lobby is very crowded, full of cops, and also a little bit of overflow from the suite next door, in which were Peter, Paul, and Mary, the Kingston Trio, various TV personalities, and a whole gang of people waiting to meet the Beatles. On a bed along the wall, then John and the other three Beatles and the manager, Brian Epstein, were like at the head of the bed, closer to the window, and we were sort of like sitting down on the bed. And Bob rose a joint, I hand the joint to John, and he smiles and gives it to Ringo and says, "This is raw taste tester."
Does that reveal something about the pecking order of the Beatles?
Yeah. Well, John was the ringleader. Ringo held on to the joint. And, he didn't know anything about the etiquette of smoking grass, that you pass the joint, because it's rare, and you don't want to lose any of the smoke. So he just he takes it like it was his cigarette, and he smoked it like it's his cigarette. So I quickly tell Victor Mahmoudis, who rolls joints so they look like cigarettes, he's an expert joint roller, to roll some more. And he rolls one for each of the Beatles and one for the manager. And so Ringo's smoking, they're all smoking it like, I didn't want them to get an idea that, that it's smoking pot is like a bunch of winos on the corner drinking out of the same bottle. Ringo was the first to get high, and he starts laughing, he starts giggling, can't stop laughing. It's infectious laughter, and the rest of us are looking at him laughing, and we're high too. So we start laughing. Well, the rest of us start laughing, and then the next John is laughing so hard, we start laughing into him laughing, because he's so funny laughing, which is what happened to me the first time I smoked pot. I started laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. I was rolling on the floor. You know, thoughts of, what, this is illegal?
And did the Beatles continue smoking pot after that? Do you have any
They
idea?
didn't stop.
They didn't stop.
No, I mean, you know, they infected the whole world with the psychedelia.
How did it change the Beatles' music?
It's obvious. It's in the music. Rubber Soul, Abbey Road. I mean, it just came out. You know, it's so there. You know, I mean, I was very happy with this meeting. You know, because what happened is exactly what I thought would happen, which is why I wanted to arrange it. Two immortals meeting and bouncing off, inspiring each other.
How were Dylan and John Lennon similar or different?
They both had the same instincts. They were really, you know, they were artists. Total artists, both of them. You know, artists who are willing to die for their art. Who are willing to give up their freedom for their art. Well, there were a lot of restrictions in pop music, and top 40 music, and contemporary music at that time, imposed by the disc jockeys, by the constraints of radio programming. And in other words, the record wasn't supposed to be longer than 2.5 minutes to get on the air. Well, Dylan and Albert broke all rules. You know, Albert, you know, in order to get somebody signed, they had to give away the publishing to the company that signed them in those days. And Albert resisted that. He would only give away 50%. And he held 50% of the publishing for Bob. And that was the first one that broke the ice. And that changed the music business quite a bit. And just the same as Like a Rolling Stone was last 4.5 minutes or something like that, I forget. And that broke the top 40 ice, you know, that changed that. In other words, Bob freed contemporary musicians. In those ways and in many other ways, by his music, by what he said in his music, by the power of his music, by his use of imagery.
What went on in Big Pink in those years that Dylan was rehearsing with a band and recording songs? Were you up at Big Pink?
Yeah.
What was it like? Did all the guys live there or just record there? What was the lifestyle
Well, they
like?
lived there. The band lived there. There'd be a lot of sessions, you know, in the basement. They'd get together and play. Dylan and the band. They didn't record everything, but they played a lot down the cellar. They recorded a lot. And then, you know, when they have get-togethers with Bob, they had parties. So they trade songs. And I always thought that Levine came out the star, because he always knew songs that he just really dug deeper songs and went over old songs.
How important was the band to Dylan? And how important was Dylan to the band? And who was more important to the
Well,
other?
I think Bob was more important to them than they were willing to admit.
Well, that's right. I had to go check out Big Pink for myself. I wanted to take a look inside, in the basement, of course. I tried knocking on the door and ringing the bell, but nobody was home. Maybe if I went around the side of the house, I could get a look in the basement. And it was in a secluded place. It was at least 10 miles off a main road, and in Woodstock, main roads are side roads. After asking at least 20 different people in the town of Woodstock and getting 20 different stories about where it was and what color it was, I finally found someone to give me some good directions. Barry's wife, Judy. I really did feel a strong sense of nostalgia and history, being there at Big Pink, where Bob Dylan had written and recorded so many songs with the band.
Why do you think Dylan decided to go back on tour in 1974 after all those years?
That's what he does. Even today, he's still touring. He just keeps touring. Sometimes he takes off a few months and goes to some place that he calls home, and then he starts to get back on the road again.
What do you think drives him to not stop?
Well, on the Isle of Wight Festival, I asked him, well, so why, was complaining about doing it. So I said, well, so why do you do it? He says, because I want to be exalted. That seems a good enough reason. See, I think his artistry is obvious, and his greatness is obvious, and and what makes him great, and why he's there, why so many people are hung on him. Because he has the psychic power, which he always talks about. Because psychic power is the ability. Psychic power is what is the ingredient of charisma.
In your book, you mentioned that you felt Dylan was both brilliant and ruthless.
Yes.
Why do you make that incredible contrast?
Because he has a goal, a wish, an aim, and he doesn't care who gets in his way to get there.
What about the brilliant side of things?
The brilliant side is that he deserves to get there.
Because?
Because of his greatness.
So can he be forgiven for being ruthless sometimes?
Well, there are dedicated fans who forgive him. I sort of forgive him.
Let's put it this way, can he be understood if he...
I understand him better now than I did. Because there was a time when I feared him, and I don't fear him anymore.
What's your biggest regret from this Dylan association over the years?
My biggest regret is that I was such an asshole.
So Bob can't be blamed for being totally ruthless when it comes to you?
No, I was a fool. Everybody played me for a fool because I was a fool.
When did you know that Bob Dylan would be doing a comeback tour with the band in 1974?
I heard rumors of it. And then, I think months before the tour, they ran full-page ads in every newspaper, and it sold out immediately. And there was millions and millions of dollars able to be put away until the tour started, when they decided who gets a refund, because there weren't that many seats. So there was a very shrewd, interesting way of promoting a concert. And then I got a phone call from Bob saying that he'd like me to do the tour. I said, yeah, man, let's do it. And he told me to speak to, I think, Jeff Rosen at the time about money and all of that crap. And they paid me very well. I went out on the tour, and it was wonderful.
I know the tour started in the north, in Chicago, and then went to Canada in the dead of winter. How cold was it?
Cold, man. We opened in Chicago. That was the opening concert, Chicago. And when he just came out on the stage, I just felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He was great. He gave me a lot of happy moments with his music and his performances. Listen to Bob, sing with Richard, and then Levon was on that tour. It was an incredible experience.
Did you use the same camera equipment on the 74 tour?
Yes, I did.
Was anything off limits to take pictures of?
Nothing.
Did you take pictures on the plane?
Yeah. We had our own 707 jet, and there was only 11 of us on it. It was the band and Bob and myself, Barry Emhoff, and Rob Fraboni, that we had this whole jet to ourselves.
What kind of amenities were on the airplane?
Everything, anything, with bedrooms and bars, food, you name it, and it was on the plane. There were a lot of video machines. It was great. You would just show up at a certain place at the airport, and there the plane was. As you got off on, Barry Emhoff would hand you an envelope, and the envelope would tell you what room you're in. Everybody had a fictitious name. You knew who everybody was by their new names. And when you get off the plane, somebody would come to the plane and hand you another envelope, and that was the keys for the hotel room. And you would just get in the limousine and go to the hotel. There was no checking in, there was no checking out. There was no nothing. It was just sheer delight. It was the greatest tour I was ever on. And there were not many people backstage. We're not allowed backstage. It was so good that I said, after this tour, I'll never go on another fucking tour again because it'll never be that great. When they did the next tour, which was the Rolling Thunder tour, I would go on it because it could never be as good as that 74 tour. That was the cream of the crop.
The album that came out of the tour before the flood, the live album of the 1974 tour,
right,
features your photo on the front cover.
Right, front cover and the inside.
Can you tell me about that scene and the similar scenes that you captured?
I don't know, that all of a sudden it was the first time I ever saw kids hold up, their hands with matches and lighters, and I took that picture, and that was the cover of the audience holding lit matches, lighters, candles maybe, and that was the cover, and it was exciting.
And was that a spontaneous thing that occurred?
Yeah, it just happened.
What do you think it meant? What did it mean to Bob?
I think it meant a lot to him. I thought it was some kind of sign of symbolic something of the times and the moment. And it was wonderful. It was exciting.
After the tour, what happened to those photos?
They're here. I have them all. This is tour 74. That's a picture of me. I don't like it. I'm showing my teeth. Kill it. It's a picture of Barry Feinstein that somebody shot taking a picture. This is a picture of the men's room. It's Richard Manuel peeing and Robbie Robertson making up his hair. It's a very, very funny picture. I like it a lot. There's a picture of Richard Manuel, the prankster, picking up a bowl of food, ready to throw it at anybody. I loved that boy. He was fun, and he was great to be on a tour with. This is Garth Hudson, laying on something, sleeping. He slept a lot, all over, every place. This is Bill Graham, the famous Bill Graham. He was the one that put on the show, and he made sure that everything was perfect. Hollering at somebody. The guy over his left shoulder is Barry Emhoff. Overwhelming picture of Bill Graham, looking like a tough son of a bitch, and he was. He'd be very explicit and very strong, and he was usually right. Telling Elliot Roberts, manager of Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, telling him what he wanted at this concert. Bill Graham and Richard Manuel at the airplane. Bill Graham really liked Richard a lot. Richard liked Bill. This is before a concert in the dressing room, doing an exercise before the concert. He's bending over to try and touch his toes. You can see his guitar to the left. Bob used to sometimes lay down on the floor and stretch. It was an unusual, situation for Bob. I never saw him on the floor before. This is another picture of Bob Dylan in the dressing room before a show. He has the guitar over his shoulder. Again, I've never seen him do that. I've never seen him hold his guitar over his shoulder. The photograph of Bob Dylan playing the guitar. This is a photograph of Louis Kemp in bed at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. I don't know why, but I decided to bring a few chickens to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel and throw them into Louis Kemp's room. Really don't have any answer why I did it, but it made a great picture. This is a picture of Bob Dylan looking at my proof sheets at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. He seemed to be very satisfied with what I had. This is Bob and his, whatever you want to call it. His hat, his scarf, his Tour 74 button. He looks more like a sheik than Bob Dylan, the singer. Good picture. This is a picture of Jimmy Carter, then the governor of the state of Georgia, came to the concert, invited us back to the governor's mansion for a breakfast. And we went up into one of the rooms, and I took this picture of Bob and Jimmy Carter. They both liked each other, and it was a wonderful picture. In each governor's mansion, there's what they call the presidential suite. And we went up there, a few of us, not Bob, and we got high. And all of a sudden the door opened, and there he was, the governor and to be president, just looking at us getting loaded. And all he said to us is, "You boys don't get in trouble now." And he closed the door. And from then on, I knew he was a wonderful man. This was a birthday party in the Forum in California. After the show, they made a birthday party for one of Bob's kids. And there's Bob, happy as a bird, blowing up a balloon, but no pictures of the kids. We stopped in Washington. We played Washington. Phillips Collection, the gallery in Washington, D.C. It's Bob looking at paintings. I liked the picture. I liked the three pictures. I liked his back. Again, Bob in the Phillips Collection, looking at a Bernard painting. Bob looking at a painting of El Greco. He was always taken with paintings. I like the composition of the whole thing. I like Bob looking at the painting, Louis looking at the wall, and two women, I don't know what they're looking at, but I like the picture. Bob next to a portrait of Modigliani. This is a picture of Bob in the gallery sitting on a couch with three overhead paintings. The composition is what got me. This is in the Phillips Gallery. It's in the sculpture room. The whole picture just knocked me out. I love to see Bob. Bob had such a good time in the galleries. He loved art, he loved sculpture, and I love taking pictures of him there. Again, Bob at the Phillips Gallery, looking at these wonderful paintings. He loved the paintings, he just loved them. Louis Kemp to his left. This picture is the crowds at a concert. They were very enthusiastic. They were going crazy, and I really knew I had to take this picture. I was backstage photographing, and I told him I would wish he would smile sometimes so I could get a picture of him kind of lighthearted. And he turned around, and there I was, and there he was, and he gave me this great smile. Thank you, Bob. This is my favorite Bob Dylan in concert, on stage photograph. This is a photograph of Bob in concert. He seemed very animated in this picture. And Lee Von Helm is to his left, the drummer, and in the middle is Robbie Robertson, the guitar player. Another picture of Bob in performance with his fur hat playing the harmonica. This is a picture of Lee Von Helm playing the drums. I really liked him. He really gave a good show. Good drummer, good guy.
You've had an amazing career shooting some of the bigger personalities of the rock music business. It includes Janis Joplin, the Rolling Stones, Miles Davis, Donovan, Ringo Starr, George Harrison. Where does Dylan fit amongst these great musicians as a subject for you?
Bob Dylan was a great subject. I mean, we had a relationship for many, many years. We trusted each other. He trusted me, I trusted him. And he was very candid. It was very easy to photograph him. Plus, he did a lot of things, I guess, that he doesn't usually do, or people expect him to do.
What do you think of how his career has developed and his place in history since you started with him way back at the beginning?
I think it's a phenomenon. I think he went the whole 10 yards. Not 9, but 10. He did the whole 10 yards. Listen, man, he's a very important person nowadays. You know, in that movie he did, whatever, you know,
Masked Anonymous?
Look at the crew, the cast he got there.
Yeah.
They just wanted to work with Bob Dylan. Listen, man, we're talking, I told you early in the conversation that I knew immediately that I was in the presence of greatness. And I still maintain that thing. And it's proven itself over the years. I think he attributed to a sheer genius in that arena that he's in that writing, music, performance. He is the best. And I don't know of anybody any better than him. I was one of Bob's great fans. I really was. He taught me a lot of things. He taught me once you do something, don't go back and try to fix it. Go forward, do something new. And the son of a bitch has done something new every time he did a fucking album. You know, whether it was good or you liked it or you didn't like it, or he didn't sing right or you couldn't understand the words. It didn't matter. It was just him. I asked him one day, I said, how come you don't do any interviews? He said, it's simple. Nobody asked me the right questions. And I understood that completely. I didn't have to say, what questions you want him to ask me, Bob? I mean, all that is the peripheral of whatever it was. You know, when he said that, I understood immediately what he was talking about. You know, what's it like to know Bob Dylan? How the fuck could you answer that question? I mean, you see, it's hard with him. You can't say, hey, Bob, what's happening? Because, you know, it's a stupid question. It's all happening.
Okay, let's cut.
And shut the light, shut the shade.
Take a white balance.
For the motorcycle scene.
For the last 9 months, I've been working on a Dylan to English dictionary. Yeah, this is the DNA of Dylan. Then I have the Dylanological application.
Oh, yeah.
How you doing? You really look like him.
Hey, thanks.
Great job, man.
What's your name?
Patrick Carlin.
What's that music on your radio?
Bob Dylan, like a Rolling Stone.
No kidding.
That's why it's so funny to meet you. It's like an ESP, you know.
All right.
When you're down in Juarez and it seems to, you know, I love that Tom Thumb blues. And negativity won't pull you through. You're great. Yeah, because the cops don't need you, and man, they hope you feel the same way too. Yeah, all right. I love it. I love it.
We're gonna film the motorcycle wipeout.
Oh yeah.
That's when all the music changes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He did a wonderful thing too. He put the Beatles onto Reefer. Bob.
Yeah.
Bob put the Beatles onto Reefer.
All right, let's cut.
And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to go see Joel Gilbert's show, his Bob Dylan show.